Welcome back, everybody, to our discussion on what's going to be in the Percy Jackson series at the end of December from what we can gain from the books. So let's get on into Chapter 2 and get going from there. Now, Chapter 2 kind of starts off with Chapter 1 finished off, with Percy Jackson trying to check with all the kids, trying to see if they remember anybody by the name of Mrs. Doss. Nobody does. Surprise, surprise. The Miss does wonderful things. The only person, though, that gives Percy a hint that he's not going completely mad is his buddy Grover. For Grover is a little bit of shifty eye. He doesn't quite look at Percy quite right whenever Percy mentions Mrs. Doss. So Percy knows something's up with Grover, and perhaps she did exist, but for some reason he's just being quiet about it. So Percy drops it for now, but he's still cautious on why his best friend isn't telling him why he's trying to hide things from him. Now, as the school year progresses, nothing really weird happens to Percy for the rest of the time. Unfortunately, just the normal weird happens, and that's just Percy blowing up at a teacher and him not getting invited to come back to Nancy Academy. Now, unfortunately for Percy, this is pretty much like a given thing. He never stays at a particular grade school all that long, especially him. It's surprising that he hasn't been kicked out already. So the fact that he's just being uninvited to come back is a relatively good thing. Now, as the rest of the school year is progressing, Percy is focusing on studies, trying to really understand it because at least he wants to be able to ace Mr. Brand's class to show his teacher that he really can do well academically, and he will be missing his friend Grover because without him there, who's going to protect the poor guy? Grover, he's not necessarily the most, how should I say, backboned individual. So Percy's a little concerned for his safety, but there's not really much he can do at this point. Now, the night before his final exam for Mr. Brandon's Latin class, he is having some trouble studying, so he decides to take a trip down to Mr. Brennan late at night to get some help with the studies. Now, just as he's about to approach Mr. Brennan's door, he hears voices coming from inside. Obviously, it's Mr. Brenner and someone who sounds a lot like Grover. And what they're talking about is kind of some weird stuff. Grover mentioning that there's a kind one in the school, how Mr. Brenner should have realized that there was one, but there's nothing they could do about that now. That Grover brings up something called the summer solstice deadline, and Mr. Brenner is just saying that it'll have to be resolved without Percy to let him live in ignorance. But right now, their job is to keep him alive. So, kind of a weird conversation that's going on. And when they ended the conversation on keeping Percy Jackson alive, well, Percy accidentally lets his book slip out of his hands, causing a bit of a clatter and all the voices to go quiet. Now, Percy does the smartest thing anybody can do in that situation, and you hightail it out of there before people catch you eavesdropping. True, these are probably the two most trusted people at the school for Percy, but most people don't like being spied upon or eavesdropped on, so I understand why Percy took off. Now, when Percy took off to go hide, he heard not footsteps coming down the hallway behind him, but hoof steps. Strange. But eventually they did stop, and he heard Mr. Brenner's voice saying that he must have misheard. So, something very weird is going on with Mr. Brenner and Grover, but we don't really get a good idea of what that is. Now, Percy does head back to his room to catch some sleep, and doesn't really talk about the whole scenario with Grover, who is his roommate, or what's going on that night. So he just kind of leaves it there because he's still trying to process, like, I heard hoofsteps. My friend is trying to keep me alive. There's kindly ones. There's a summer solstice. What the heck is going on? When all he wanted to do is get a Latin lesson. Now, unfortunately, there's not much he can do about that right now. For the next day, he has an exam in the Latin class, and we presume it goes alright, but we never get a confirmation on that. Instead, as Percy's about to leave the class, Mr. Brenner pulls Percy over, and he kind of has one of those conversations that adults have, like they're trying to be nice and caring, but the words that they're using just comes out wrong. Like, when you tell a student, like, it's understandable that you're not going to be here, it wasn't really right place for you, you're always about to eventually leave here. Like, he's trying to say that in an upbeat way, encouraging, and it's just coming out completely wrong. And Percy's holding it together pretty well until Mr. Brown brings in the final nail that you don't belong here. And that just sends Percy off, and he just leaves right away. Now, it's pretty hurtful when you have your teacher who believes in you the most to say those words to. If it was a teacher you hated or didn't really care much for their opinion, like, okay, yeah, whatever, man, see you later. I'm going to just go mess up your whole office before I leave. But when it's your favorite teacher that says stuff like that, that's hard, man. That's real hard, especially when they say they believe in you and expect the best from you. Yeah, that's rough, man. So I understand where Percy's coming from. Now, he doesn't see Mr. Brand for the rest of his time at Nancy. He just is busy packing his stuff up and leaving to head for New York. Now, Thankfully, his buddy Grover's also so happens to take a same trip on the bus to New York, so he gets to hang out with him for a little while longer. Now, as they're hanging out on the bus on their way to New York, Grover can't stop fidgeting and he seems very nervous and worried about something. Percy had always thought that was just because of all the bullies on the school bus when they went places, but Grover always seemed to not like leaving the school, so Percy wonders why he's still fidgeting. And he's fidgeting so much that Percy just couldn't help but asking, like, hey, do you see any kindly ones around? Which causes Grover to have a bit of a panic attack, and Percy then goes to reveal that he had been eavesdropping on Grover and Mr. Brennan. Now, at this point, after hearing the whole thing, Grover pulls out like kind of like a business card and gives it to Percy that this is my summer address, immediately making Percy think like, wait, is Grover a rich kid? He has a separate summer home? Like he never thought he was a rich kid because, well, he just didn't seem like the kind of boy who did. But he did go to a fancy academy where there was a lot of rich kids, so kind of makes sense. At that though, Grover says like, yeah, come hang out, or if you need my protection. Now, the reason why it's so strange is that so far what we've seen, sorry Grover, you're a bit of a coward, and I don't really know if anyone would want to get your protection. So far, Percy, according to him, has been protecting you, so not really sure why we'd want to do that. But hey, the man is trying to show protection to Percy. At that, Percy says like, okay, thanks, and pockets the card. Now, just as this happens though, the whole bus starts stuttering to a halt, causing the bus driver to bring the bus over to the side of the road. Now, at that, he follows everybody out of the bus as he goes to work on the engine. Now, as the bus driver is working on the engine, which is kind of strange because usually you don't see a bus driver actually knowing how to fix his engine. Usually it's just call the tow truck, get the tow truck over, get a bus, wait an hour or so, and then everyone files onto a new bus. At least that's what happens nowadays mostly. But hey, at least the guy knows his way around the engine, so I'll give him that much. Now, as everyone's standing on the side of the road, they see a great little country store across the highway full of vegetables, fruits, lemonade, and completed with three old ladies with a giant basket of yarn and what looked like two giant pairs of socks that were sweater sized. And they were just massive things that they were knitting. Now, as soon as Grover sees them across the way, he starts to freak out, and Percy, being a smartass, immediately says, like, hey, do you think that'll fit me? And Grover is just having none of it, like, hey, we gotta get on the bus now. And he starts trying to pull Percy towards the bus, but he's like, wait, no way, dude, that's hot. There's no AC. There's no way I'm going back in that thing. I'm just gonna stay out here, dude. And Grover's just like, okay, fine. He heads back into the bus. Now, as Percy's watching the three old ladies, something very important in this scene happens. She pulls out a shears and she cuts the string. Now, usually nothing really all that important, but it's very weird, my man, because as soon as she cuts it, he hears it as if it's like piercing the sound of the thread just being cut all the way across the highway. A kind of unnerving moment for Percy, but a few moments later, the bus driver hollers that he got the engine fixed as he threw out a chunk of metal and the engine started working again. They could file all back on. Now, one thing I will say, Rick Riordan, like, it's fine to write that for your 12-year-old, 13-year-old audience who knows nothing about engines, but if you are throwing a chunk of metal out of your engine, you have major engine issues. You should not be driving that, okay? There's no reason why you should be chucking out a piece of metal out of your engine. So, just saying that yeah, it's fine as a kid, like, you completely get that, but he obviously didn't spend much time researching on what the bus driver could be fixing or throwing out. That would actually make sense. So, just a slight comment on that Rick Riordan could have done a little bit better job on that little part, just saying, just a random hunk of metal just got chucked out, like, okay, great. Now, before we move on, I do want to mention that this scene that I just talked about is probably the most important scene in the entire Percy Jackson universe. Maybe not necessarily the most important, but I mean, personally, I rank it up there. Like, I don't know of a more important moment that affects everything that comes after it. Maybe I should say it's the most important foreshadowing moment that we get in the entire series. It's not all that memorable, that's true, but the implications of what we just saw there is very, very important and pretty much plays out for the rest, I'm going to say for the rest of the universe. Everything that comes after that is pretty much affected by that one string being cut. Now, when they get all back on the bus, Percy's talking with Grover a little bit, and Grover's like, did you see them cut the string? And And Percy's like, yeah, I saw it, and I think I heard it too. And Grover immediately starts panicking, like, no, 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 I can't believe this is happening again. I can't let this happen again, not to me. It's never past sixth grade. They never get past sixth grade, just completely freaking Percy out at this point. And at this point, Percy's like, hey, so what are you talking about, man? Well, what do you mean by sixth grade? What do you mean that it's happening to you again? And at that, Grover just simply asks, like, hey, let me walk you home from the bus station, okay? Promising you that, dude. And just a completely freaked out and terrified Percy's like, oh, okay, dude. And Percy's like, did I just see someone die, or does that mean someone's going to die? Grover doesn't say anything, but he pretty much is like, so do you want oak or willow for your coffin? Is pretty much the look that Percy's getting from him at this point. Now, let me just say, what can we expect from this chapter to actually make it to the show? Honestly, I don't think you can expect too much. The first part, I don't really think you'll see too much of the rest of the school year in the show. I don't really think you're going to see him eavesdropping on that meeting between Mr. Brenner and Grover, because pretty much soon after this we actually get into the full-on part of the story, so I don't see that happening. For the last part of the chapter with the whole thing with the three hags and the fruit stand, maybe. I really hope they do. As I said, for me, it's a very important foreshadowing point for what's to come in the future of the series, but I can honestly see them just cutting that out for the savior of time. So really, what I expect them to have from this chapter, the only thing I can see them actually keeping is when they stop at the side of the road to see those three hags cutting the yarn. That's the only thing. Otherwise, I don't see why the rest of the show would have it. It just slow things down. Although as a Percy Jackson fan, I would enjoy it. I don't know if audience members would really enjoy it or really find it all that useful. If I'm just gonna be fair and honest here, I would personally enjoy it, but let's just be real here. We're probably just gonna get an 8 episode season. If we know Disney TV shows, that's probably gonna be the case. So 8 episodes for a whole book on Percy Jackson can be done pretty easily, but you're going to have to cut out parts here and there. And honestly, the first 2 parts of this chapter aren't really all that important if we're going to be doing a TV show, if I'm honest. The movie didn't do it, and there's a lot of issues I have with that Percy Jackson movie, but honestly, this first part, I don't really think anybody missed too much except for us crazy Percy Jackson fans. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Will they have the entire chapter scene for scene in the show, or are you kind of agreeing with me that most of this is going to be cut and the only part that's going to be really used is maybe those three hags? So just let me know in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch y'all later. Bye.